Hello everybody. I'm really glad to be part of your course and I'm flattered that Laura asked me to participate. I really hope that what I have to say in the next few minutes will be of use for you. But let me start by introducing myself. My name is Monica and I was born in Costa Rica from a Mexican mother, which means that I never quite belong because I would either be the Costa Rican living in Mexico or the Mexican living in Costa Rica. And I think that made me realize very early on that we all live inside a narrative, a sort of story that we have been told about who we are. With time, we end up believing these stories and they become part of our identity and of our culture. What I mean is that as the outsider, I was able to see how Mexicans thought of themselves and how Costa Ricans thought of themselves and how then they would act accordingly. What I mean is that the stories that we have around ourselves shape our behavior, and that would be the first thing that I would like you to take from this talk. That the stories that we tell ourselves, that we tell ourselves about the world, the stories that surround us end up shaping our behavior. I'm a storyteller with a special interest in stories of social or environmental value. What that means is that I take complex content such as the gas exchange between the surface of the ocean and the atmosphere, for example, and I try to come up with ways to share it in a more entertaining way. I rearrange information until I come up with a structure, a narrative that is hopefully more engaging with the wider audience. I design stories for a living and I absolutely love it. Science communication is what led me to meet Laura, your professor. And by the way, that's how her name is pronounced in Spanish, Laura. Funnily enough, we didn't meet in person until very recently, but with time, we had already exchanged so many emails and so many conversations that by the time we met in person, we were already good friends and there was no ice to be broken. That is the power, actually, of doing what you love and of surrounding yourself with good people who share your values. But I will come back to that later. Laura asked me to share with you a little bit about what my job as a science communicator entails, especially when it comes to fighting misinformation about climate change. And I will touch on that, but mostly I would like to share with you a few tips that I have to help you become better communicators yourself. I hope that's okay. Let me be blunt. I believe I have one of the most important careers out there. We are social animals as humans, and without the ability to communicate effectively, society would simply not exist. At a time like now, where we all need to come together and rally against the biggest challenge humanity has ever faced, we need to put communication at the forefront of that fight, right next to science, technology, and data, or we won't get very far. You already know this. The only way to change our behavior, the only way to take action is to care. And the only way to care about something is to attach some feeling, some emotion to the information we are presented with. The only way to make that link between information and emotions is through powerful storytelling. That is how a Mexican learns to be a Mexican, a Costa Rican learns what it is like to be Costa Rican, and in your case, how an American learns what it is to be American and falls in love with it. We learn something first, and then we attach some emotion to it. And that's how we will raise above our difference and come together in this fight against climate change through powerful storytelling. I think this current pandemic, COVID-19, gives us an interesting scenario. It's like a compressed laboratory, a compressed experiment on a global crisis. And the lessons, I think we can apply them to science communication and to the fight against climate change when it comes to communications. This is another thing that we already know, but COVID-19 has made it painfully clear, and that is that if we don't think that something is going to affect us directly, we don't do anything about it. We just don't care. And as I said before, if we don't care about something, we don't do anything about it. I live in England now, and it was very interesting, scary also, but interesting to see how, even if here we had the luxury to be able to kind of look into the future by learning from what was going on in China or Italy or Spain, we still waited and waited until the situation got very intense here in England as well. And we waited until that point to take tougher measures here. And then you see that around the world, countries see what's going on around them, but it is not until the situation explodes in their faces that they decide to take actions, if they ever do take direct actions. We only mobilized around COVID-19 because of how terrifyingly fast it spreads. But when it comes to climate change, it feels slow moving, and that is truly one huge challenge that we need to overcome when it comes to climate change messaging. Another parallel between the pandemic and climate change when it comes to communication is showing that it affects everyone. It is true that some of us are more privileged than others, so we won't be the hardest hit. But climate change is going to change the world as we know it for everyone, just like COVID-19 has. Another similarity is that as human beings, we need to hold on to something, to some hope, to be able to cope with such a stressful situation. So when it comes to climate change, we are kind of trusting that our brightest minds are going to come up with some miraculous solution in time. Just like we're hoping that with COVID-19, they are going to find or develop the vaccine soon before it spreads any farther. But the danger there is that that can lead to inaction and the relaxation of the measures that we need to be taken now. For instance, social isolation. And then when it comes to both climate change and this pandemic, we have an added obstacle: misinformation and information overload. We've been hearing about these things for very long, and it's very stressful, so we get overwhelmed and we shut down. That's why it's so important to only share key messages that are well designed and spread them selectively. I'll give you an example. In the early days of COVID-19, somebody said that it was just like a strong flu and that it didn't seem to affect young or healthy people much. That caught up, and now it controls the narrative, but that is truly dangerous misinformation. We know that's not true. Likewise, in the early days of climate change, some people called it global warming. That caught up, that narrative stuck, and now we have things like, say, Donald Trump saying that climate change is a hoax just because it is, cold in February in New York City. The conversation around climate change revolves, understandably, but in my opinion, way too much, on the effects that climate change will have on nature. That creates a disconnect, like you would need to be some sort of tree hugger to care. Perhaps if we spoke more about economics, social injustice, food, war, and violence, but also about technology, science, and research around climate change, that'd be better. Just like with COVID-19, we believe that economy and the environment are not linked, as if you needed to choose between one or the other, but they are interlinked. The spread of the coronavirus would impact the economy long term, so we needed to stop it now, even if the economy was going to take a huge immediate hit. And climate change will only put more and more strain on our economies. So in order to mitigate the damage, we really need to begin thinking the way our economies function. One final but very important similarity. With both climate change and COVID-19, people should not get to choose what they believe in. Their opinion should almost be irrelevant. We should be guided by science and data. Climate change is real and swift action is needed. COVID-19 is a highly infectious, dangerous disease, and swift action is also needed. So you see, storytelling is at the core of the impact that we want to have on the world. Choose carefully the information you spread. Be passionate, but deliberate about who do you want to talk to, why does the message apply to them, and how do you want to make them feel. Okay, so this is the part where I give you 7 tips that I have learned through my years as a science communicator to help you improve your own communications. Most of them are common sense, but it's always good to remember them. First, imagine you were talking to a child. Einstein said it better. If you cannot explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. So, of course, don't underestimate your audience, but use simple terms. Don't overkill. Talk like you would in a normal conversation. Second, do not barrage them with information. You don't need to say everything there is to say about your subject. Resist the urge, which is very common among scientists, to go to the minutest of details to explain the subject. When it comes to storytelling, every building block cannot have the same weight. That is, that not every aspect of your story will be so enthralling that it needs to make it into the story. After all, you're not teaching a class. You will be telling a good tale. Third, conduct your own focus group. I find it very useful to just present a subject in 2 or 3 sentences to people and see what questions they come up with. Because you are a specialist in your field, which means you think very differently about your subject than the people out there. So this is a very useful exercise to familiarize yourself with how wider audiences think. Fourth, lay down a contract and stick to it, because every good story starts by establishing what genre it belongs to and what it is going to be about. That gives the audience the opportunity to decide if they want to participate, if they have the time or the willingness to listen to your story. So always start by establishing what the story is about and why it should be of interest. And after that, make sure you stick to that contract and give your audience what they came to see. Fifth, work with communication experts. You don't need to be good at everything, and there are people like me whose job is to craft stories, to design narratives. So talk to the graphic designers, journalists, videographers, learn from them, share your work, and be open to feedback. We can all help each other. Sixth, have a hero, because every good story must have a protagonist. And it doesn't even need to be human. It could be a carbon particle or a hungry virus or a rusty microscope. Remember, you are not writing a scientific paper. You are sharing scientific knowledge through the construction of an engaging story. Who is your work likely to impact? Who has been fundamental in advancing the field? What are the characteristics of that molecule that makes it unique? What is that difficult challenge that must be conquered? All of those can be shaped into protagonists. Finally, use emotions to deliver the knowledge. Use the objectively engaging parts of your research to hook your audience and thread scientific information into the emotional rhythm of your story. Keep in mind that the emotional component of your story might not be the science, but the journey, the adventure to arrive to that knowledge. So that's it. It's not too difficult, right? Laura also asked me to share a little bit about my Antarctica expedition as part of a leadership program for women who work in STEM. And yes, I did participate in that expedition and it was awesome. But I'd like to summarize the whole experience like this. When it comes to climate change, we need our best minds out front, looking for solutions. Whether those minds are male, female, non-binary, or any other, should not and does not matter. I want to invite you to actively make sure you build diverse teams in your work groups. You will find solutions faster this way, inviting people who don't think like you and have different life journeys than you. This is the best moment in history to kiss bigotry and discrimination goodbye. Finally, I would like to leave you with one phrase that really stuck with me from the expedition. Visibility without value is vanity. Do try to be the best version of yourselves. Do not use your voices to aggrandize yourselves, but to truly contribute to make the world a better place. If you do that, I promise you that your careers are going to be so much more fulfilling, and in the process you're going to meet amazing, inspiring people like your professor, Laura, who now I count amongst my friends. Thank you so much. This is my email. Feel free to contact me if I can be of any help. Have a lovely day. Bye.